And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, Kenneth Grunfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Tuesday, February 25th. We have a lot to cover on the show today. Before I get into all that, just want to remind you guys, as always, to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat if you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. It makes the show more lively, more entertaining, between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate your guys' viewership each and every day, so any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCPodcast.net. That is GSMCPodcast.net. So, let's get into what we are going to discuss for today. So, we're going to start off the show. We're going to talk more about Matthew Stafford. There was a report out there that included 4 possible destinations for him, 4 teams that supposedly have interest in acquiring him if he is indeed traded. So we'll talk about them and which landing spot would be the best for him. In the second part of the show, we'll talk about Giancarlo Stanton of the Yankees. So pretty much confirmed that he's going to be out indefinitely, dealing with elbow soreness in both elbows. And we'll talk about the impact of that on the team. We'll also get into talking about Joel Embiid and whether or not the Sixers should shut him down with his latest injury. We'll talk about the tush push. So supposedly there was a team out there that proposed a ban for it. So we'll get into that as well. And I'll talk about something that I came across on TikTok regarding the tush push as well. And then in the final part of the show, we will continue our season overviews in the NFL. We will talk about the Dallas Cowboys and how their season went this season and what they have to do to, get back to the postseason, because it was a disappointing year for them. So that is the rundown for the show. So let's get into the first topic, which is talking about Matthew Stafford and the 4 potential landing spots for him if he does get traded. So there was a report out there that had 4 teams listed. And the following teams were the Giants, the Steelers. My graphics aren't working today, so I guess we're not going to be doing that. So, so the Giants, the Steelers, the Browns, and the Raiders. Now, when you look at those 4 teams, there's maybe 1 or 2 that I look at and say, okay, that would be, a team. If you look at the team, you could win with that team. And they could be a playoff team. And right now, I would say that about the Steelers, and I would throw the Browns in there as well. Because the Browns, the polar opposite happened for them in 2024, comparing it to 2023, right? You had so many different quarterbacks that you had to go through. You had Joe Flacco come in and, they rode him into the playoffs. They rode the magic carpet ride into the playoffs. And then last year, the opposite happened. Deshaun Watson was not playing well, gets hurt. You put in Jameis Winston, and, at times he provided a spark. I was at that great game that he had against the Ravens. But he was a mixed bag. And then you also put in DTR, and he really wasn't that good. But the Browns, as long as they don't trade Myles Garrett, like if they trade Myles Garrett, then I'm out. Then why are you trading for Matthew Stafford then? But, I like some of the pieces they got on offense. If they could just... The problem is the offensive line has been banged up over the last couple of seasons, and you really don't want that offensive line to be a weakness of the team if, let's say, you did bring in Stafford. Because Stafford had those problems in L.A. Now, they were able to overcome it, of course. But if you're acquiring an older quarterback, you need to make sure that he is well protected. Because if he's not, it's not going to work. But Jerry Jeudy had a good year. David Njoku is a solid tight end. You get some other weapons in there, and we'll see what they end up doing with the running back position, because I don't think Nick Chubb is coming back. That could work, and you still got a defense that's solid. And then for the Steelers, similar things to say about them. Good defense. You got decent weapons on the offensive side, but, the offensive line, although not really. Well, I think they did suffer injuries on the offensive line, but they have a relatively young offensive line, and it's still a work in progress. So bringing in Stafford, behind that shaky line might not be great, but if it works out, that helps out the Steelers. I think, even though he's a couple years older than Russell Wilson, I think Matthew Stafford is playing better ball than Russell Wilson is. So it would be some sort of an upgrade. But I apologize, camera. I talked about Russell Wilson, and now you see the yellow glow around me there. So, yeah, no, it's interesting. And then you look at the Giants and the Raiders. Now, I'm going to be honest. I would probably rank the Giants last. If I were to do a ranking, I would put the Giants last right now. Then I'd probably put the Raiders. Actually, well, I put the Steelers at 1. The Browns and the Raiders are you could kind of flip-flop them. The Raiders, it would be a good spot for him because it's indoors and Pete Carroll is there. And supposedly Tom Brady could be a heavy influence once again on trying to get Stafford. And I thought that was interesting because, you don't really hear anything about them being interested in Aaron Rodgers. So I guess Tom Brady, kind of figures, Aaron Rodgers is probably done. We shouldn't really try to go out and get him. But, we'll see. But the reason why I'd probably rank the Giants last is just because they're not a team that. It's the same thing with the Raiders too. But at least with the Raiders, I like the direction that they're going in. Bringing in Pete Carroll, and you got Tom Brady, who, was a factor in bringing in Pete Carroll. But the Giants, I just, after what happened last year, I'm just not. I would stay away. Now, as a Giant fan, I would love to get Matthew Stafford. That would be great because it would give Giants fans some optimism, some sort of optimism going into next season. That, hey, we have a quarterback for next year. Now, it might not be for an extended period of time. You might only have him for a couple of years. But at least it would make football watchable again for the Giants, at least, in theory, until they take the field and, Stafford has no time to throw. But, you could say, well, look at the Giants. He'd be throwing to Malik Neighbors and, Tyrone Tracy'd be running the football and Andrew Thomas would be back. You'd have a left tackle. I get it. But the Giants were just, and the Browns were a mess too. I get it. But I feel like the Browns, with their roster, you probably take their roster over the Giants roster at the moment. Again, because you also got Myles Garrett. Now, if they trade Myles Garrett, then forget it. But, yeah, so it's going to be interesting. And, we talked about what teams would have to give up to get Stafford. And, I don't know if I'd necessarily be looking to trade. If I'm in the top 3, I'm not looking to trade my 3rd overall pick to acquire a 37-year-old quarterback. And Matthew Stafford wants a big pay raise. He wants to get paid around $50 million a year. And, look, he played really well when Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua came back. But you want to give up draft picks, an exorbitant amount of draft picks, get this 37-year-old quarterback, pay him $50 million, and there's a possibility he could fall off at any time. That's the risk that comes with it. And a team like the Giants, where they're desperate to win, they could be the team that does it. Anthony in the chat saying Matt to Miami. Listen, warm weather, that would be good for him, but they got Tua right now. And he's not going to be a backup. He also said, I keep on reading reports that the Rams are willing to eat some of the contract for championship teams who are over the cap. Well, the teams that I just mentioned, none of them are championship caliber. The Steelers are a playoff caliber team. Browns are a playoff caliber team if you get the right quarterback in there. But there's no championship level team that Matthew Stafford would be traded to. It'd be a downgrade for him. And it's just, you would think the Rams and Stafford are going to work it out. And I'm going to continue to say they will work it out because they came that close to getting to the NFC Championship game. And if they did, I would say they beat the Commanders. It would be a very close game, I think, but they beat the Commanders. And you saw what Philadelphia did to the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. You don't think with the young guys that the Rams drafted and how their defensive line has been playing and the problems that they were giving Jalen Hurts and that offensive line in the divisional round, you don't think they could have did the same thing to Mahomes and the Chiefs? I don't think they would have blown out the Chiefs, but that would have been a competitive game as well. And I think the Rams, you could have looked at them as maybe being Super Bowl champions if they would have got past Philadelphia. They gave the Eagles a run for their money in the divisional round. And Stafford played well. If it didn't snow, who knows what happens in that game. But we can't be playing hypotheticals. We could play that game all day long. Eagles won that game. Eagles won the Super Bowl. But they came that close. If Jalen Carter doesn't sack Stafford there, who knows? Who knows? But let me know what you guys think, though, about these potential landing spots. Again, there's positives for every single one, but for some of them, there's more negatives than others. The Raiders, they might not have the best roster in place right now, but I think, with the head coach there, the ownership group, the environment, it could be appealing. You're still, out west. The Giants, it wouldn't be good for him. It'd be great for Giant fans to be like, hey, we got Stafford. But, but it also depends on what they would give up. But I think in terms of who has the better rosters, the Browns and the Steelers. And I'd probably rank the Steelers at number one. So that's kind of where I'm at. I still think he's going to stay with the Rams, but let me know what you guys think. What would be the best landing spot for him out of these four teams? Anthony also in the chat before we go to break. I think some of these quarterbacks that used to be at an elite level, I guess Stafford need to tone down their ego and realize they're not where they used to be. He might need to be a backup. Seattle they're not going to trade him within the division if they were to trade him. I don't think he needs to be a backup. I think he still can be a starter. He played really well once Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp came back. He does not need to be a backup. If he's going to be traded, he's going to be a starter. So we'll see what happens. But let me know what you guys think about all of this in the comments. So we are going to take our first break, and then when we come back, we will talk about the Yankees. We'll talk about Giancarlo Stanton. So he's going to be ruled out. He is ruled out indefinitely, basically. And we'll talk about the impact of that injury and how it, will affect the Yankees going forward. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast.